Hello. This week we're going to talk about JavaScript. So this week I'm going with the format where I've just pre-done all the examples, and I'm just going to cut back and forth between this PowerPoint and the finished examples. I'm sure that's the way it would be done in like a large lecture environment. That's just not normally how we do things, because normally I have a small class, but that's what I'm going to go with today, and I'm going with that because there's no way I could get through this in like less than 2 hours if I didn't, and I'm not trying to do that. So some feedback on what you think about this would be useful to me, because normally I do the whole fumbling through the examples, and overwhelmingly the feedback I get on fumbling through examples is that it's worthwhile and people like to see it and you learn from doing that, and you're going to get the opposite of that today. But the trade-off is that you're going to get to see, is that I'm going to get to cover this in a reasonable amount of time. So think about whether you like that as a format or not. I'm kind of leaning towards it because as this class goes along, things just start getting so complicated that the examples get complicated. And in a face-to-face class, they would oftentimes end up going multiple days or even spilling over into another week. So I'm trying to avoid that. Anyways, that's that. So this week we're going to talk about JavaScript, and we're going to talk about that with a focus on form validation. Now, JavaScript's an interesting thing because you took a 10-week course on it at some point, but for some people that might have been 2 years ago. And in the past, I've always had people in this class that haven't had JavaScript. Last year I had a lot of them, which was just kind of a weird group. So I'm going to go over some of the basics, like some very basic things, like creating a variable, but I'm pretty much going to skip past all the basics of the language because I can't teach you that in 1 week or 1 day or something like that. I'm really just going to tell you what you need to know to work with forms and show you how I do things. You're free to do things on your own. It's entirely possible that you've got a pretty good background in JavaScript and you can do things however you want. I'm just trying to give you the tools that I think you need to succeed. I'm not asking you to do an assignment this week, just a lab. I know that we're not getting into a lot of depth on this, so I feel kind of bad about it. But the bigger picture is next week we're going to talk about jQuery, and jQuery is built on top of JavaScript. And so we're going to do a lot of the same things that we do this week, next week, just in a slightly different context. So while this might seem like it's going to go fast, and I know you're not going to get enough practice with it, especially when I'm going to blow through the examples, I do feel bad about that, but trust me, we're going to be writing JavaScript for a while. That being said, do try and wrap your head around the concepts that we're covering this week, because if you understand how to do them in JavaScript, you're not going to have too much trouble with jQuery, if you understand the basic flow of things. All right, so we're going to talk about data validation. When I think about JavaScript, I'm not thinking about cool computer games or changing your cursor or something like that. I'm thinking about data validation. In other words, how can we make our forms more usable for our users? I don't know if usable and users are supposed to be in the same sentence, but whatever. So things I'm thinking about is like has a user filled out a required field? We are all familiar with that error when you've got a form and you forget to put something in. It'd be good if we could let them know before they press the submit button. The worst thing we could do is let them press the submit button and then just have the insert on the back end not work. So we want to try and preempt that. In PHP, we use some pretty crude tools to give the users feedback, right? Like sticky data, if you remember how that goes. And I'm always grappling with how do we give feedback to a user that something went wrong. With JavaScript, that's the right tool for that job. We can do other things like, does that date look valid? We can look at the actual values and try and validate those. Has the user entered text in a numeric field? Those are the things I'm thinking of. There's a world of things that you can do with JavaScript, and I'm thinking about the ones you can do to improve your user's experience on your forms. A slick form with cool validation and lots of feedback. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, that's the very definition of polish for a website in my book. When you see a bad form without polish, it oftentimes creates the impression that there's no need to enter any information here. This is not a good website. So polish on your forms, I think, is the best place you could put polish. Some people make really pretty home pages, and that's cool. But at the point where it's time to interact with your users, your form validation is very important. All right, I don't think I have anything to say about that. As you can tell, I'm not reading my slides. I never do. I'm just rambling about it. All right, so there's a lot of ways you can do data validation. We have done data validation on the server before. That's the most reliable because it happens on the server and there's no way around it. But the user feedback is painful, right? Like that's that thing where I have some string, like some output string, and I can't figure out where to put it on the page because none of it quite makes sense, especially when you consider that your validation is oftentimes happening above the head of the page. So you know all about this one. It's still a reasonable tool. It's just not the most user-friendly. Another way you can do it is just in the browser using native validation. In my experience, I find that people are overly attached to these things. I want to pretend that these things don't even exist. I'm going to spend like the next 5 or 6 slides showing you some of those, but these are easy, but they're unreliable. And what I mean by that is like an input type date. So the normal things are like password and text. I'd say those are the normal types of text boxes. There's all kinds of things that are not, quote, normal, like option selects, which are like normal, but they're not inputs. There are special types of inputs, and you just shouldn't rely on them, is my point. So all of the fancy stuff about inputs on forms, I think you should just pretend that they don't exist, because you can't assume that they will work in all environments. And so I know it's weird to think that we care about someone using Internet Explorer, but you need to care about someone using Internet Explorer on your website. If you're relying on on native form validation to take care of your data validation for you, you're going to get burned, and that's not okay. And there's also the other weird thing where like even if it is supported in a browser, the support is not uniform. So like special things are like email, date, things like that. Right, email, date, color, URL. I have an example I'll show you in a minute. I'm not good at blowing through. I don't know if I am or if I am not good at blowing through these. There's also attributes. Attributes are those things that you put on an input, like required. Again, you don't need to rely on those things if you're going to use JavaScript. So I think this is time for me to show you an example. All right. So here are some inputs in a form, right? There's a plain Jane text, here's an email, here's a date, here's a color. These 3 right here, these are what I would call, they're HTML5 types. Let me show you how those work out. So that's just text, right? You know about text. There's nothing fancy about text. Email, here's how email works. I go write some stuff. I deselect it or I focus off of it and I get lit up like that. I'm telling you, if there was a submit button, it would also not let me submit the form, but I don't have a submit button. And if I do something that looks like email, I'm good, right? And so you're probably thinking, that's cool, right? Like that's what I wanted that to do. Well, I'm telling you, there are browsers that will ignore that. And if a browser doesn't know what type email means, guess what it's going to default to? I'm waiting. It defaults to text, and that doesn't do anything for you, so you can't rely on that. The good news is that JavaScript is a more reliable way to do that. Here's a date. That's cool, right? Very cool. So my format, and if you don't like that format, well, I'm not too interested in dealing with it because there's other ways to deal with it in JavaScript. Here's a color picker. That's cool, right? It gives you hex values. Now, what's interesting, I just don't really have another browser going on, but I'm doing this in Firefox. You should do it in Chrome or Edge. I'm telling you, these things will be different. They'll probably be different well, I don't know how different they'll be, but they can be pretty different. And they're just different in terms of appearance. But the idea that one user is going to have one experience and another user is going to have a different experience, I'm not too comfortable with that, but that's not the end of the world. But the end of the world for this is when you have is when these things get ignored entirely and you're relying on it. Date's the best one to talk about because you know what you're going to do with this. You're going to stuff this into a database, and it's going to need a very specific format. And if it doesn't have that format, I don't know, your query might break. I don't actually know what happens if you try and stuff something into like a date field that doesn't look like the expected date. It's either going to be null and just write not what you want, or it's even worse, I don't know if it could cause an error or not. So anyways, those are those fancy types that I'm saying you should just forget they exist because you can't rely on them. And that's the standard I'm going to hold you to. I don't care like really what your stuff looks like. What I care is that it's reliable and it behaves consistently. Because you're going to have a whole bunch of users out there ranging from, very tech savvy to stumbling their way through the form. And the best thing we can do to help our users is to have consistent layout and behavior on our pages and on our site. The other thing I want to show you, it's not really related, it's just a cool thing that I think I like to bring up here, are these things called data lists. I bet you've never seen a data list before. I think there's a good chance. It's like an option select. And so here's my syntax. You see it's kind of like a select option. It even has the option. So this data list here is defined right here, and it's linked to an input of list. I don't know, it's not type list, but it's got a list associated with it. I'll show you what that is. Here's where I copy and pasted that from. So this is useful for when you want to have pre-selected options. You should, at this point, understand why you'd like to have pre-populated fields. It's because it goes for a nice insert, and when you want to look at that data later, it's good to have uniformity in that column. But what this does is it allows users to do their own thing. Like if I go happy, you see I can choose from the list, but I could also do whatever I want. I don't know if this is how a Google search works, but that's what it seems like a Google search does, you know, where you type a few characters and then it seems like it probably queries some underlying table and pulls back, you know, the top 10 suggested results. Now this is more in the category of neat. I'm not ever asking you to do it because, as you can imagine, populating those fields would be ridiculous, right? Like, what are you going to do? Come up with every way that they're going to spell something? It's a good idea to do this if spelling of things matters. The scenario where I would imagine you could use this is, you might remember in 133p we built a dynamic option select. You could build a dynamic data list. You could probably imagine, well, you either know what I'm talking about or you don't. But you could do that, and that'd probably be the best way to implement that. But that's a form of data validation and usability. So recapping those native validation types, it's lightweight, which means it's already there for you. It doesn't require any work. It's cool when it works, but it doesn't always work. You shouldn't trust it, and I'll ding you for using that. I mean, if you want to stack JavaScript on top of it, fine. But if you're relying on it, I'm going to just pretend it's not there. So the solution is JavaScript, because JavaScript is JavaScript. It's going to run the way JavaScript runs. So all those things that we just talked about, those can all be done with JavaScript. All right, so JavaScript. You have already taken an entire course on this, but I don't know how well you learned it or whether you remember it or when that was, so we're going to get into it a little bit. I'm assuming you're familiar with the syntax. One of the painful things about JavaScript is the DOM. So you write JavaScript to manipulate the elements on a web page. The elements on a web page are organized in a hierarchy called the DOM, Document Object Model. This would be a day one JavaScript thing, but I'm just telling you, that's one of the painful things, is accessing the elements, because everything's a child of something, and there's attributes of children. So one of the things that I do a lot of is variables. Of course, variables like I don't know, I guess that's like, it's probably day 2 of a normal programming language. You want to create a variable, it's going to be keyword var. So this is kind of I find it a little weird because in PHP we don't really need to declare our variables, but here we need to declare them. And when you want to fetch something from a form, we usually fetch things by IDs. IDs are unique, so that's kind of how that works. And it's this nasty syntax here, document.get element by ID. If you're like me, you probably mess up the capitalization of that string all the time. One of the most painful things about JavaScript is things are long, and they've got that dot notation, and they're very case sensitive. These kind of have roots in the DOM. JavaScript has been around since the 90s, which is why it's so... I don't like it at all. It's very sticky. I don't know. It's like a lot of case sensitivity. Everything's got a long name. It's because when they created it, they weren't exactly trying to make a work of art. The work of art is jQuery. jQuery is the thing that is built on top of this that makes everything probably the way it would be designed if it was more modern. Anyways, rant over. This is how you get something. I like to create variables to store things because I just hate writing this. And then I just reference it from there over and over again. There's a lot of ways you can access things like get elements by tag name. That will grab all of the elements of, type input. There's all kinds of ways you can fetch things. I can't get into them here. All right, so this is a pretty obscure little thing, and I'm just saying you should do it. So you should write this line, basically. Document dot Oh, so this is the name of your form. Oh my gosh, set attribute no validate. What this does is this turns off native validation. So, like that color thing that well, all right. I'm going to have a hard time demonstrating this one to you, but this turns off the native validation. I'm saying you want to do that because you're going to be writing JavaScript, and you won't know whether your JavaScript validation is doing its job or the form is just handling that for you. So you should turn it on like this, right? It's just a simple one-liner. In my example, switching back and forth, like I said, this is complicated. Oh gosh, where did I write that? There it is. It's that line right there. This just means turn off whatever validation is already built into the form. Now, in reality, yeah, you're probably going to want to do that, because what if you were trying to validate something and your browser's trying to validate something? What one of those wins? What if it passes one of them but not the other? I don't know why that would happen, but that seems weird. Like a situation you'd probably want to try and avoid. Now, in the scope of this class, the reason you want to turn it off, in my opinion, is that you won't know whether the stuff you wrote is doing the work or the browser's doing the work. And so you could think you're doing something well, but you're actually not doing anything at all. So if you're going to write JavaScript, you're just going to open and close script tags. You see right here, I made a variable to represent my form. Don't worry, I'll get through this as I go. Right, so there's my turning off validation. Alright, so get elements. I've kind of hinted at this already. So get element by ID. ID, that's going to get the ID of the thing. IDs are unique, so that's a good way to fetch a thing. You can fetch things all kinds of ways. What I do is I make a function called getID, because I hate writing document.getElementById. It's the case sensitivity that particularly kills me. So I like to make a function, and you saw my function. Here's my little function I made. This also serves as like a review/introduction to how to make a function in JavaScript, because it all depends who taught you. Me, I make you do a lot of functions if I'm doing JavaScript, but I don't know that you necessarily did that. The syntax for functions is, I guess you could, it's fair to say it's the same as it is in PHP. Keyword function, whatever you want to call it, list the parameters. Maybe there's a return, maybe there's not. I like this because I just write getID and then the ID of the thing, as opposed to document.getElementById. So that's my little function I'm talking about. Good introduction to functions. I'm not really going to write functions today. They are in the lab though, so you'll get to see those. As you see, we're already 20 minutes in and I've only gotten started, but I think this is going to get better. So debugging. So debugging JavaScript is a pain. In my opinion, it's the most difficult thing about it. In PHP, when you have an error, you're going to know because you're going to get a line number and it's going to be prominently displayed. In the world of, where am I here? In the world of JavaScript, I refresh and I don't know what's going on. What you need to do is right click, inspect element. You need to go view that console. If you have errors, you're going to see them in your console down here. And so you can use this console as a debugging tool to console.log things. Or, I'm telling you, if you have syntax errors, they're going to show up here. They're not going to show up in here. So please crack open that console. First thing you do when you start writing JavaScript. Literally the first thing I do when I start writing JavaScript, I open up a script tag and I throw an alert. That's what I do. Just to make sure I haven't done anything too crazy yet. Right, and so that's like the test that I haven't messed something up yet. But if I do something like alert, then I get something down there. That's how that works. That's how you debug this. Alerts are your best friend for debugging, not for user experience. All right, so console.log is going to put something down in that console. That's a useful place for debugging. Alerts are another thing you can do. People do hate alerts for sure. They're like a little pop-up. The cool thing about alerts, the reason I'm trying to sell you on them, is that they halt the execution of the problem, or of the program. So you've seen alert before. You have to click OK or cancel. Maybe it's just OK. I can't even think about what they are right now. But your program is not going to go any further than this alert. It's going to sit there and hang up and wait for the user to click on it. And you can use that as a developer to make your code halt in certain places. So console and alerts. Console is cleaner, I guess. Alerts have a purpose as well. All right, so getting values. So if you want to get and set values, it's this dot value property. So this right here would be how you access a value. This would be how you assign a value. This is very useful for things like form elements, like inputs. Inner HTML is different. Inner HTML is the thing that's between container tags. So like, let's say if you had an H1 that said hello world, the inner HTML of that H1 tag would be hello world. So I don't find myself getting inner HTML pretty much ever, but you can set it a lot. That's a pretty common thing to do. Now let's talk about events. So most of what we're going to be doing is event-driven programming. So in the world of JavaScript, there's a ton of events. I have no idea what most of them are. The ones I use the most are click, right? Like when you click on something. Focus is like when you place your cursor in a text box. Blur is when you remove it from a text box. Key press, submit. There's many more. If you're interested, look into the documentation. There's a ton of them. Now, the difficult thing about this is we generally know what blurs and focuses and clicks are, but you have to know what they're called in the language. In JavaScript, they're called on whatever, on click, on blur, on focus, and there's no capital letters in them, so that's something that could cause some trouble. On the note of events, the most important one is window.onload. So that is the event that happens when your page has been loaded. So ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to attach events to elements, but you can only attach an event to an element once the element exists. And the element exists formally once the window has been loaded. So this little syntax right here, you'll see a lot of that. So I hate that I have to start there because that's kind of binding events, but let's talk about binding events. So binding events is when you attach an event to something on a form. Window onload, that's the one I showed you. And so there's three ways to bind events. I do it using anonymous functions. One way you can do it's like this. I think Ralph teaches it like this. So there's your thing that you're selecting, .add event listener. Action is going to be like click, and then function is going to be the name of the function that you want to call. So this is what happens when you do it. This is the name of the action. And that's going to be like click, not on click. That's super confusing. And also in the world of jQuery, these events have yet a third name, so it drives me a little crazy, but this is maybe the way you learn how to do it. It's not the way I'm going to do it though. So in this one you got to call that function. I use these things called anonymous functions. So mine looks like this. I select the thing. This is going to be like on click, on blur, on whatever, right, on submit. So it's going to be on whatever the thing is, and equals function, right? It's called an anonymous function because it doesn't have a name. It's also called an inline function. It's weird because functions are supposed to be reusable, but this isn't reusable, right? This is a one-timer, but right, you see it's kind of the alternative is you have a named function that you call here, and then I write what it does in here. So it's called anonymous functions. That's what I'm going to use. The worst way to do it is like this. You very well may have learned this way. I don't know. Right, so you have an input, and then you put an action equals function. The reason that's the worst is I think of that very much like inline CSS when you write the style down in the element. It's not, I mean, I don't know, it's not bad in that it doesn't work. It's just difficult to follow. Like, if I'm going to be looking at your work, it is not cool to know that I'm going to have to go scan through it and find all your scripts, as opposed to like blocks of script, which are easy to find. This is kind of tough to find these things. So I don't like it. I like that though. Alright, so that onload thing. So notice this is use of an anonymous function. What this really says is once the page is loaded, I want to do this stuff. And this stuff is going to be attaching events to elements. That's how this is going to go. Not everything goes on in the onload, but binding events does. So let's look at a couple of event examples. Throw an alert on a focus of a text box. Console.log the value of input on a blur, and console.log the value of an option select on change. All right. So focus, that means we're talking about binding events. Let me show you that example. All right. Another thing I like to do in this onload, I've just messed this up so many times in my life that the first thing I do when I'm doing my onload is I put an alert in there. And what that means is, it means that you're going to get one of these. That means that you haven't messed up yet. I always do that. I'm telling you, you're going to need alerts. So the first thing I do is I create some variables to reference the various parts of my form. And I said we were going to throw an alert on focus. So here we go. Here's something called name. That corresponds to this text box up here. And on focus, I want to call this anonymous function, and I'm just going to say focus. This is annoying. I hate this function, actually, because it does that. Right? It's just annoying. And at this point, this hello world got to go. All right, so that was binding a focus event to something called name and just throwing an alert. The next thing was console.log the value of an input. All right, so I said on blur of that name, and it is annoying that I've got a focus and a blur and they're separate, but they are separate. They do different things. So on blur, I want a console.log this.value. I don't think I've touched on this yet. You know about this, though. This is a reference to the calling thing. You could say name.value. You could. But I'm telling you, since when you're doing an inline function like this, the name of the calling thing is pretty straightforward. It's that. All right. Let's see what this does. I got to get rid of that focus event because it's too annoying. I promise it's too annoying. All right. So I'm in it. I blur it by clicking out of it, and there's something down on the console. Why did it say good? I don't know. Oh, it's the email validation. Yuck. All right. So do you see how it's doing what it's doing? That's a good example of testing. And the next one, console.log the value of option select on change. So change is our event. This is an option select. Let's see how different this is. Here it is. What did I say? I already forgot what. Okay. I have to use these things twice. So color dot on change, right? So when I was listing events, I didn't list that as one, but yeah, change means you make a change to the value of the thing. And so when you change it, it's going to log the value of the thing. So here's where you now are starting to get an opinion of whether you like this format or not. So I change it, and it shoots a blue down there. I change it, and it shoots down there. You see, not changing it doesn't do anything. So it's not quite a focus. It's like a focus with a change. On changes are kind of good, I guess, for text boxes, but you see what I'm doing. So really my focus here is not the specifics of the form, but that's how you bind events to form controls. And I also want to point out that it's all inside of my onload, because until your form's loaded, you can't bind anything yet. I get a little nervous about how long this is going to take. Let's see. All right, so the most interesting event on a form is on submit. On submit's what happens when you press the submit button. And this is the time when you oftentimes want to validate those form fields and make sure that the user actually dealt with the things that need to be dealt with. So it's one thing to say, hey, that email address doesn't look like an email address, or hey, that password's not strong enough, right? I mean, those are just the hints and feedback we give them, and that's great. But when the user submits the form, that's when it's time to, make them fix it. I'll show you what this looks like. So since it's bound to a form, it's going to be in your onload. And where is it? Here's my little group of stuff I'm doing on submit. So this is what This is what I want to happen when you submit the form, is from here to here. Now the interesting thing about this is you want to put this return false in here. All right. So if you don't put return false in here, I'll show you what happens. I don't know how this demo is going to go, but I'll try. So I got my stuff in here, and I go submit. I lose it. And I don't know what the problem is. Like, I don't know whether my feedback happened. I don't know whether it didn't happen. When you press submit, it submits the form. You know this because you've used forms before. If you put a return false in there, then it won't submit the form. And that's when you get a chance to see your information. Like this is the magic that I forgot to comment out, or I don't know what, I guess we'll just leave it in there. Like my email validation and stuff. You see how I can't submit it because there's a false. Now in reality, we don't just want to blindly return false every time, but when you're developing your form and you're building up that feedback, for sure, just put a return false in there. Otherwise, you are never going to see anything happen. And it's super frustrating and confusing. So just stuff that in there and make sure to take it out when you're done. I kind of don't really, I know where this lecture goes. I don't really address how returning true goes, but in the lab I do. But long story short, what you'll do is somewhere in here, you're going to have like an if statement, and that if statement is going to say if all the form fields are valid, then return true. True means actually submit the form. If all your form fields are not valid, then return false. So it'll have a fork in its execution in the end, but for now, just return false. Otherwise, your forms are going to submit, and not fun. Not fun to deal with. All right, so here's how you can alter styles with JavaScript. I don't know if you know this or not. There's kind of two ways you can do this. You can select the element and go .style .name of the property and then assign it a value like that. That's okay. I'm a bigger fan of using classes, so I'd rather, I mean, this works fine if you're just doing one thing like making the font red, which sometimes you are, but I'm a big fan of adding a class of pretty. And so that looks like this. So selector, right, whatever it is, dot class name plus equals. This means I'm adding a class to the thing, because it may or may not already have a class, but I'm adding one. I also want to point out there's a space right there, which you would never notice. I guess the reason you need to do that is otherwise it would just, let's just say it already had a class of red or something. It would be red pretty as one weird word, but if you put a space in there, then it's going to work. And at some point you're going to need to strip out those classes, and so it's going to be element dot class list dot remove the name of the class. So those are your tools for that. I will mention that jQuery has something that does this better, but for now, adding a class and removing a class is a good way to style things. Inline like this, yeah, sure, you can do that too. The next thing I want to show you is kind of the most difficult, in my opinion, the most difficult thing I'm going to show you today. And that is grabbing the value of a selected radio button. So I just kind of cut it and put the code here for it. Long story short, the reason this is difficult is that radio buttons are grouped by name, right? And we're always doing get element by ID, get element by ID, get element by ID. And that doesn't work here because the ID of those things isn't really the thing that matters. It's kind of like the name that matters. So what this means right here is create a variable called whatever. That's styles. I copied and pasted it from my example. So name of my form dot elements, and then so that'll fetch them by name. So like if you had a group of radio buttons, this right here would grab all the stuff with the name of sty. In my example, that corresponds to those things right there. And this is an array. And then we're taking our array and we're iterating over it. We don't exactly have for eaches in JavaScript. Big surprise, jQuery does, but for now we don't have those. So this is just a for loop, so starting at 0, going to the length of the thing, incrementing. You can kind of see what's going on here. And so I iterate through the things. So if the thing in spot 0 is checked, then I get the value and I break the loop. Otherwise, I just iterate through it until I find the thing that's checked. So working with radio buttons is kind of difficult in JavaScript because you kind of have to look at the whole collection of them. And this, the way this is written, this break just means don't go any further. If the first one's checked, then we're done. Break means stop execution of a loop. That's what that means. All right, some examples. Now, believe it or not, we're closer to the end than it seems like. That probably actually makes you not feel very good because you're like, this hasn't been very thorough. I hope that's not what you're thinking, but it's kind of inevitable because there's so much ground I have to cover. All right, so on change the color of the paragraph to the specified value. What the heck does that mean? So that's going to be a change event, and that's going to be, let's see what I did for that. I've got so much stuff here, it's hard for me to figure it out. Oh, I see it. It's this stuff here, right? Is that what I said? On change the color of the paragraph to the bottom. Sorry. Actually. So this is saying on submit instead of change. Gosh, I'm trying to figure out what I did. Yeah, it looks like this is what I did. So I didn't do quite what it said in the prompt. So here's my thing where I grab all my things with in the group of style. I iterate through, I find the one that's selected, I set this variable to the value, and then down here I have an if block. If style is wild, then I add the wild class and I remove the bland class. Otherwise, I add the bland class and remove the wild class. That's the weird thing about working with properties and styles when you're dynamically altering them. Everyone always thinks to add the new one, but you got to get rid of the old one. So I'll show you how that works out. That is just this. So this is my on submit. And so on submit, it's going to grab those radio buttons, figure out when was checked, and apply it. You can kind of see what it does. So I didn't follow my prompt. I didn't do it on change. I said on submit is what I did. On submit. Gosh, is that not what I just did? I'm struggling. I'm trying to make this go fast, so I'm kind of getting in trouble. Oh, and now I realize I just did that one. I didn't do that one. So on change. Okay, not so hard. I wasn't thinking about what the actual form looks like. The other one was up in here. So on focus, it was on blur. Actually, no, that's not right. Here's the on change. So when I change the color, notice I'm using that function instead of a variable here. So go get that thing with an ID of P1, set the style color to this dot value. And this dot value is going to come from, and so this is a color is it's a drop down. It's that thing. So when you change that value, it's going to, gosh, this is, I don't like this because it's so long. It's going to set the inline, set the change the color. So like that. All right, so in this example, we're toggling classes. In this one, we're just changing properties. And then the last one here is no more difficult. On submit, set the inner HTML of my H1 to hello. So on submit, that is just that thing right here. So on submit, just indiscriminately, there's no if or anything, just get that my H1, set its inner HTML to hello name.value, right? And you know what name is. It's the same form field we've been messing around with a bunch of times. So all that means is when you write Ken in here and I press submit, it'll say hello Ken. So believe it or not, I mean, I've covered a lot of ground, but that was most of it, right? We're manipulating the inner HTML, changing a property, swapping a style. So now we're going to get into some more specific applications like styling invalid inputs. Now on this one, I'm just going to tell you that your entire lab is all about this, and you see this is already getting long. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but just because I know that you're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with it in the lab this week, and you're also going to deal with it a bunch next week, so you'll get examples of this. So there's a bunch of ways you could style a bad input. The kind of the standard one is actually manipulating the box shadow. You know when you're filling in a form, and you remember how I was ragging on native validation and the text box turned red, indicating there was an error? That's actually box shadow. If you've never messed with that before, I hate the syntax on it. I always mess it up. I'm just telling you, you're probably going to mess it up too. I don't have any advice. It's just hard. But that's a good way to do it, is just make the box red. Another way you can do it is style the label. So like if it says name, right, you style that label name. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do with JavaScript. It's easy. It's the easiest thing in the world to do with jQuery, and we'll do that next week. Or the other thing is an error div. So you've seen this before, down at the bottom of a form or off on the side or something. It'll say, you know, like a list of all the problems you have with your form right now. It's a reasonable thing to do as well. I like hint divs. Hint divs tell you what you need to do for an unintuitive field. And we do a lot of that in the lab this week. I am definitely leveraging the fact that a lot of the more complicated things we're doing are in the lab. I mean, more examples just isn't what I want to do. So here's that box shadow. I think it's box shadow like that, actually. Don't ask me what these things mean, because you can look it up. I've tried. Like, why are there negatives in there? Is that right? Yes, it is right. I think what that means is like the shadow is on the inside of the box as opposed to the outside of the box. I think that's what that means. And then there's things like blur radius. It's pretty... Oh, actually, there's the little explanation. It's like another language to me. I just do -2, -2, +2, and then a color. And it works. Just pure experimentation. All right, so my last examples. So if name is empty on blur, then make the border red. So that thing that we were just talking about. And by border, I mean box shadow. So did I say on submit if the name is empty on blur? So here's the blur event for name. You know, when I console.logged it, here's my little thing. So this is what data validation looks like. We're going to do regular expressions soon enough, and you're going to get a lot of practice with those this week. But this is not a regular expression. This is just so if this dot value is nothing, then add the class error. Otherwise, remove the class error. If you don't put this in here, the else, it's going to get stuck red, and that is going to make people frustrated. You've all been on a forum before where you're trying to get it right, and you can't get it right. What did I do? I thought that was going to turn red. Name, dot on blur. Oh, I need to say, I don't know. I didn't have it saved. Oh my gosh, all these pop-ups, it's just making my head spin. I don't even know why these, yeah, so the bads and goods are coming from this email. It's just driving me crazy. This always drives me crazy. It's either I make one tiny little form for every one of these sets of skills, or I have one big form, and it's just, it's all over the place. I know that, but it's unavoidable. So that's a form of data validation. We actually looked at it, and depending on whether we needed to or not, we removed that. Display a hint div upon focus of name. So let me show you how I like to do this. So here's how I do it. I make my form, and then I make a hint div, and I just fill it with nothing. So it's there, even though it's got nothing in it. That's what I do. And this is where I'm going to do hints like, hey, that email address doesn't look like an email address. So there's my thing. It's got an ID of hint, and I do it like this. So upon focus of name, set the inner HTML of hint to please enter your first name. Now this one's not going to be perfect. Do you see how it does that right there? And it stays there, and that's annoying, among other things. So this is one of the few of them that I was going to write just because it's super short. So what you need to do, actually, if you want to deal with that, so cool, focus needs to do that for a hint. But the problem with hints is you always need to get rid of them on a blur. So I'm going to copy that, and just here in the blur, before I even do anything, I'll just say inner HTML equals nothing. Now, if I recall, I think there's a function in JavaScript for like clearing the inner HTML of something, but I think I looked it up, and all it does is that. So like it might be called like .clear or something, but all it literally does is assign it an empty string. So that is one of the problems with providing feedbacks to users, is that you do want to provide that feedback, but make it go away when the problem's fixed, you know? It's one of those things that people struggle to deal with. All right. Could keep going further, but we're going to do more of this in jQuery, and you're going to see that some of these things are a lot easier than in jQuery, and also the syntax conflicts. So I'm just kind of drawing a line and saying, hey, now you know about binding events and validating forms in JavaScript. We'll continue to look at it further in jQuery. But before we do that, let's talk about regular expressions. I'll be honest, this feels tacked on, but it's a huge part of what we're doing. So I'm not going to do anything resembling an adequate job of teaching you about regular expressions. I'm just going to teach you what they are for. So they're also referred to as pattern matching. We have dealt with this before in the world of PHP where we didn't have these available to us. These are the best way to look at a form field and determine whether that form field is valid or not. You know, we've done all kinds of things like modding and using string functions to try and figure things out, but this is the real way to do it. So you can do regular expressions with JavaScript, which we will do, but you can also use them using those native form fields, and I'm not really advocating for doing that for the same reasons I never do, but they're an easy way to mess around with it. As you'll see, regular expressions in JavaScript are more difficult than they are in HTML5. So let me show you some basics. So the first thing we'll start with is quantifiers. I'm not even sure what the right thing to start with is. I'm going quantifiers. So quantifiers, so you specify these patterns, and quantifiers are used to say how many of something should occur. So like an asterisk is 0 or more of something. 0 or more. So nothing is fine. More than one of it is fine. Plus is 1 or more, right? Similar. So there needs to be at least one. Question mark means it could either be there or not. And then in curly braces, exactly how many times. So like curly braces, if you had curly braces 3, that'd mean something has to happen 3 times. Now, is this the appropriate place to jump into the conversation? I don't know. I've put a lot of thought into this. This is just the easiest one to follow, so I start here, but I guess we should talk about bracket expressions maybe first. So you can use square brackets to define a range of characters. So like A, B, C in brackets means we'll tolerate an A, B, or a C. You can type out every character, or you can do it with a hyphen like that. So A through C means A, B, C. And here's another interesting one. I know it's tiny, but I don't know how tiny it is on your screen. So like this one says A through F in lowercase, and then A through F in uppercase, and then 0 through 9. You see how they're just mashed together? That's okay. Regular expressions are difficult because they're mashed together like that. That would mean anything lowercase A through F or uppercase A through F or any digit is what that would mean. So that's like a hex value. All right, this one right here, this is the range 0 through 9, but this one brings up a thing because you see a percent sign in it and you're probably thinking, oh, is that like a wild card or something? No, it's not a wild card. Everything that's not recognized as a specific symbol is just going to be treated like a literal. So 0 through 9 in square brackets with a percent sign would be a digit and a percent sign. And, oh gosh, there's so many rules, and I just don't know where to start and where to end. I'm just trying to help you understand the definition of these things, very generally speaking. Oh, I don't even know what to talk more about. I've got a few examples that I'll mess around with. So there's these ranges you can use, and I like those because they're easy for a novice. And then there's shorthand for things, so like /D is any digit, which is the same as a 0 through 9. W's alphanumeric, so that'd be like A through Z and 0 through 9. A dot is a wild card. You see, like, I don't know where you're supposed to start because you need quantifiers in conjunction with like specified character sets to create a regular expression. And this stuff here, you're going to see a lot of it in the real world, but it's just shorthand for things that you can do here. Those are all the rules I'm sharing with you. There's all kinds of things like has to happen at the beginning of a string, has to happen at the end of the string. There's like ors, there's ands, all the logical things that you would ever need to do, they exist. I assure you of that. I can't get into them here. So let me show you my example of that. So I made some regular expressions. Here's one. So I know you might not have been able to see that in the PowerPoint, but you can see this. Here's a pattern. So these are HTML5 patterns. It's just the easiest way to work with regular expressions. Because when you start dragging these into JavaScript, well, then you're writing JavaScript and things get harder. This will tolerate either an uppercase C or a lowercase c and then at. In other words, it will tolerate cat, but not, oh, I'm in the wrong field. It'll tolerate cat. You see how it blows up when I cursor off of it? It's weird how it lights up like that, but you see how you can see the rule happening? You can see, and as I break the rule, you can see the immediate feedback. That's what I'm saying. JavaScript, sure, you'd have to write for that to happen, and JavaScript is more reliable, and I like it, but this is the easiest way to test these things out. So if you want to mess around with these and try and get a handle on them, which I don't think is necessary, then this is a good way to do that. So here we got wildcard at. So, like, that's going to be eat would work, right? But just at doesn't work. If you're wondering, that doesn't count as a wildcard. For at counts. So hopefully this helps a little bit. Like I said, I don't need you to be great at this. This right here is lowercase a through c, and I need exactly 3 of them. So like CCC or CCA, but once you go beyond that, you're going to have problems because you violated the rule. Now you could probably understand and appreciate why it might be worth learning this, but it's also worth understanding that there's a lot of people that have spent a lot of time on these, and they already exist. You just need to find the right one for your application. This is going to be 1 uppercase letter followed by 0 or more lowercase letters. In other words, number 4 is going to be a proper noun. So like that's fine. That's fine. That's not fine. I put a number in there. And here, this is going to be a 5-digit number. I'm not even going to test that one. This one's kind of weird. This is a 3-digit number, and then a literal hyphen, and then a 4-digit number. In other words, this is a phone number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No good, because it was missing the literal hyphen right there. And so at this point, you see, well, maybe you appreciate. If you don't, it's fine, but you can do all kinds of cool things with this. Probably more accurately, all kinds of cool things have been done with this, and they are free of use for you. All right, so that's how regular expressions work. They're far more complicated than that. I assume we could probably do a 10-week course on it, I would imagine. I've never taken that course. I'm no expert in them. I just know enough. So, regular expressions in JavaScript. So that was cool for a demo, but it doesn't really work right. There's 2 ways you can make them. I probably recommend this way. So, when you do a string, you wrap it in quotes. And if you don't put it in quotes, like if it's just a literal, you would think it's referring to a variable. If it's a number, you just infer that it's a numeric type. If you're talking regex, it's wrapped in forward slashes. So that'd be my rule. That would mean that would just mean type ABC. So the forward slashes, those are important. When you go find regular expressions on the internet, there's a good chance they might not have those forward slashes around them. So you probably might need to add those. The other way you can declare them is like this, so using a constructor. Now, I don't know, I guess the upside to the constructor is that you don't have to put those escapes around them. But the problem with this constructor is if you have forward slashes in it, they're going to need to be escaped. Right? So you don't just need forward slashes around the whole string like you do this way, but you will need to escape all the actual forward slashes, which hurts far more than doing that, in my opinion. And there's a bunch of ways you can test these. I'm going to use test. Test is Boolean. It returns true or false based on whether the thing matches the regular expression. So there's your regular expression you created, .test. There's the string you're looking at. Search is different. Search is like index of. Search returns a -1 if it doesn't find it. Otherwise, it returns the first index in the string where the pattern occurs. This is useful when you're looking for like a string inside of a string. Like if you just want to know whether there was an @ in something. I mean, sure, you could do that with this and a bunch of wildcards, but you got search and test. Those are kind of the primary ones. And so I'll do 2 examples. Well, just one. Just the worst one. But I'll do it twice. Use a regular expression to evaluate an email address. All right, so what I did for this is I went to the internet. Let me drag that on over. Oh, I don't even have it. So I went to the internet and I grabbed a regular expression for validating an email. I did like the first one I saw. Let me pull up that page. All right, so I did a search like this, and I do a different one in the lab. Oh, W3 resource. So that one. Wait, yeah, that's not cool looking, right? But I know what this is. All right, so when I'm looking at this, that's the regular expression right there. Notice it is escaped, so I took that, and this is all working off of a blur on the email. You know this because it's been screaming at me good and bad the whole time. So there's 2 ways you can do this, and I'm illustrating both right here. So here's the regex. I just grabbed that thing, I pasted it right in here, had the forward slashes on it, and I said if regex.test this.value, this being a reference to email, alert good, otherwise alert bad. Now you don't want to do alerts for your real users, but when you're just demonstrating this, you couldn't ask for a better tool. But in reality, what you'd want to do is probably just style it if it was bad, and you probably wouldn't style it if it was good. But you can if you want. But that's the kind of traditional way of doing it. Well, by traditional, I mean the way I'm going to do it. And so, what have I done? I don't know what I've done and what I haven't done. Some things should be happening. Oh, I'm in the wrong thing. Gosh, so terrible. All right, so I'm here. Email. So that's bad because it doesn't look like an email. At something.net. That looks good, right? So I'm not sitting here trying to tell you about what this pattern means. I'm not going to. I also don't need you to be able to reconstruct it, but I do need you to know how to apply solutions that you find out there in the wild. So that's how I do it. The other way you'd do it, and so I'm telling you this, the difference between this line and this line, I literally copied and pasted it, but what I did is I had to go in front of every one of those forward slashes and put a forward slash. So like there's one there, and one there, and one, I guess there should be, oh, there's one there. I don't know what I was thinking. I did, so, gosh, I don't know. Should I really? Fine, I'll do this. Because it's the last example. I now feel like I have time. So the difference between here and there is I don't want those escape strings on it. But what I need to do is find all the forward slashes and put forward slashes in front of them. Sounds like some kind of a joke. I don't know. I guess it is. Now I do that. And I refresh this thing. You're never going to know the difference. Oh, that didn't go so well. I think I forgot that. I don't even, it's so meaningless just putting more forward slashes. So I really don't know where I'm at. That looked like the problem. And you can see it seems to be behaving the way it is intended now. So as you can see, this is probably the one you're going to want to do. Well, I mean, it depends on what you're doing. But they're both options. This one, I guess the most important thing to understand about this is when you find these on the internet, they're going to be written either this way or this way, and you might need to modify them to make them work. The lab, which you haven't seen yet, was a total disaster when I did this, so you'll see what I mean by that. And so that's what a regular expression looks like. The good one for email, like the real one, is way longer than that, believe it or not. But that kind of is everything I was trying to talk about this week. So we skipped a ton of regex, and we didn't do everything we could do with JavaScript, but we're going to be on this subject for a little while, so you'll get more of it. Like I said, there's not an assignment this week. The assignment is going to be adding data validation to that registration form that you made in week 3, and I'm going to give you the choice of using either jQuery or JavaScript for that. So if you want to get started and use this right now, you can. If you want to wait till next week and try and use jQuery on it, you can. So this is just week 1 in the discussion about using client-side scripts to validate form data. So hopefully you got something out of this, and you can now see what I mean where I went with the canned examples. You see I barely got through this in an hour with canned examples, so it wasn't even a real option to write them all out. So if you got some feedback, go ahead and share it with me. So hopefully this went well. Thanks for watching.